On the 7th of January 1942, Adolf Hitler sits in a warm room in East Prussia and explains to his inner circle why the United States of America does not matter. He has just declared war on the most industrially powerful nation on earth 4 days ago, a decision made in the heat of the moment, irreversible, already done. And now he is telling the men around him why it was fine, why it changes nothing. He calls America a decayed country. He talks about racial problems, social inequalities, a society he describes as half Judaized and the other half negrified. He asks with genuine contempt how anyone could expect a state like that to hold together. No one in the room contradicts him. 7,000 miles away, in a cramped shipyard office in Richmond, California, a 57-year-old man named Henry Kaiser pulls a hotel notepad toward him and starts sketching. He has never built a ship in his life, dams, yes, roads, bridges, massive civil projects that reshaped the American landscape. But ships never. The established shipbuilders say it takes 8 months to build a cargo vessel. Kaiser looks at his sketch, a simple boxy freighter broken into prefabricated sections, and tells his team they are going to build one in 4 days. Hitler believes the Americans are soft, divided, and racially incapable of mounting a real war. Henry Kaiser is about to spend the next 3 years proving exactly how catastrophically wrong that judgment is. The miscalculation does not begin in January 1942. It begins years earlier in thick folders compiled by German military intelligence. Reports on American industrial capacity, military readiness, national character. The conclusions across all of them are consistent. America is a nation of businessmen and consumers, not warriors. In 1939, the United States Army is so small it ranks below Portugal's. Its factories produce automobiles and refrigerators. Its people have grown comfortable in a long peace and have, the analysts write, no appetite for sacrifice. They are not wrong about what they see. They are catastrophically wrong about what it means. In May 1940, President Roosevelt stands before the world and announces that the United States will produce 50 aircraft per year. In Berlin, the High Command laughs out loud. In 1939, total American military aircraft production was below 30 planes. To jump nearly 20 times over sounds like fantasy, like a man who has never run a mile announcing he will win a marathon by Thursday. Hermann Göring, the man who built the Luftwaffe from nothing into the most feared air force in Europe, shares the contempt completely. He knows what it takes to mass-produce modern fighters and bombers, precision engineering, specialized alloys. A deeply trained workforce, years of refining production methods. America, in his view, has none of these things. The idea that they can conjure an air force out of car factories is to him a bad joke told by frightened men. The generals who have fought Americans before are no more impressed. In 1918, fresh use, troops arrived in France. They performed adequately, the assessments note, but they came late. They suffered far fewer casualties than the European powers. They had little say in overall strategy. The memory of those green soldiers reinforces a belief that hardens into doctrine. Americans lack the hardness required for sustained, grinding combat. Albert Speer, who will later become Hitler's Minister of Armaments, sits through many of his leaders' dinner monologues about America. Hitler insists Americans played no prominent part in the First World War, made no great sacrifices of blood. Will not, he declares, withstand a real trial by fire. Their fighting qualities are low. There is no such thing as an American people as a unit. Just a mass of immigrants from many nations, many races, bound by nothing strong enough to matter when things get hard. The flaw in all of this is simple, and it is deadly. German analysts measure American potential by American performance in peace. They see a nation that has not mobilized and conclude it cannot mobilize. They see factories making consumer goods and assume those factories cannot make weapons. They see diversity and assume diversity means weakness. They are wrong on every single count, and the war will prove it in steel, aluminum, blood, and fire. The transformation begins before America officially enters the war at all. Summer 1940, France has fallen. Britain stands alone under bombardment. Roosevelt challenges American industry to perform what he calls a miracle of production. Automobile factories will stop making cars. Appliance plants will stop making refrigerators. Every lathe, every press, every assembly line in the country will be converted to war work. This is not a speech, it is a deliberate rewiring of the entire American economy. In 1941, more than 3 million automobiles roll off American assembly lines. Over the next 4 years, only 139 more passenger cars are built, 139. The entire capacity of the automotive industry is redirected to weapons almost overnight. Chrysler starts building aircraft fuselages. General Motors turns out airplane engines, guns, trucks, and tanks. Packard manufactures Rolls-Royce engines for the British Air Force. Companies that once made nothing more lethal than kitchen appliances learned to produce ammunition in quantities that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. The conversion moves fast because American industry possesses something German planners never fully understood: standardization, interchangeable parts. American factories have spent decades perfecting mass production techniques that allow different plants in different states to manufacture components that fit together perfectly. A part cast in Ohio bolts onto a block machined in Michigan, and the finished product is assembled in California. This modular system, matured over years for civilian goods, is now aimed directly at war. Skeptics say it cannot work. Aircraft are not automobiles. You cannot stamp out a four-engine bomber the way you stamp out a Ford. The tolerances are too tight, the system's too complex. A single heavy bomber contains over 1 million individual parts. An automobile has maybe 15,000. The math seems impossible. Henry Kaiser does not argue the math. He changes the process. December 1940, Kaiser wins a British contract to build 30 cargo ships. He has no shipyard, no maritime workforce, no shipbuilding experience of any kind. What he has is a way of thinking about problems that does not recognize the boundaries other people draw around them. He does not see a shipyard in the traditional sense. He sees a manufacturing problem. The specific product, dam, bridge, ship, is less important than the system that builds it. Every process can be broken down, analyzed, optimized, and scaled. Traditional shipbuilders hoard knowledge in the hands of craftsmen. A riveter spends years learning his trade. Kaiser does not have years. He has months, so he designs jobs that can be taught in days. Wherever possible, he substitutes machines for skill. Jigs and fixtures do work that once required the steady hand of a man with 20 years of experience. Established builders say this will never work. Ships are too complex. The sea is too unforgiving. Boats built by amateurs will sink. Kaiser builds them anyway, and they do not just launch faster, they launch better. His defect rate is less than half that of conventional yards. He breaks the ship into modules. Instead of building the hull from keel to mast on a single slipway, entire sections are prefabricated in separate shops simultaneously. Bow segments, midship blocks, stern assemblies. These pieces are brought together and welded into place like parts in a giant construction set. He leans on welding instead of riveting, faster, less specialized, more scalable. He recruits workers from everywhere. Builds housing so they have somewhere to live, establishes childcare centers so women can work full shifts, organizes health clinics to keep a workforce running 12-hour days actually functional. Training programs cut the time to become a competent welder to 10 days. In 30 days, a raw recruit carries his full weight on a construction team. The workers who fill Richmond come from everywhere and nowhere. Farmers from Oklahoma driven off their land by drought. Factory hands from Detroit, it laid off during the Depression. Women who have never worked outside the home. African Americans leaving the segregated South in search of wages and something that feels closer to dignity. At peak, Kaiser's Richmond yards employ over 90 people. Nearly a third of them are women. They drill rivets, weld seams, lay cable, pull wire. They do jobs that were exclusively male before the war began. Government posters and newsreels seize on their image. Bandanas, coveralls, rolled sleeves, they become Rosie the Riveter, the human face of a mobilization German planners never imagined because their ideology told them it was impossible. In 1941, the average time to build a Liberty ship, the standard Allied cargo vessel, is approximately 230 days. By 1942, Kaiser's yards bring that down to 45 days, then 30, then 20. In November 1942, at Richmond Shipyard No. 2, they lay the keel of the Liberty ships Robert E. Peary. 4 days and 15 hours later, she is in the water. 4 days and 15 hours. Less time than a German U-boat needs to cross the Atlantic. For Admiral Karl Dienitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, this number is not yet a headline, it is not yet real. His whole strategy rests on a simple equation. German submarines must sink Allied shipping faster than the Allies can replace it. In the early months of 1942, it appears to be working beautifully. The second happy time begins. German U-boats prowl the American East Coast in water still lit by the glow of unblacked out coastal cities. Captain Lieutenant Reinhard Hardigan in U-120, 3 stocks tankers so close to shore he can see city lights reflected in the smoke of burning ships. He sinks 8 vessels on his first patrol, returns to Germany a hero, others follow. In the first 6 months of 1942, German submarines sink nearly 400 ships in American coastal waters. Oil that should fuel Allied tanks washes up on Atlantic beaches. Dienitz believes he is winning. He is looking at the wrong number. Even as U-boats chalk up kills, the shipyards are accelerating. In 1942, American yards launch 8 million tons of new merchant shipping. In 1943, 19 million. By autumn of 1943, new construction exceeds losses for the first time. Every ship a U-boat sinks is replaced by 2 more. Dienitz watches the tonnage tables with growing unease. His staff runs the numbers. To strangle Britain, the U-boat arm must sink approximately 700 tons of shipping per month. In 1942, they come close. But by 1943, American shipyards alone are launching over 1 million tons per month. The goalpost keeps moving, always forward, always out of reach. By May 1943, the tide turns hard. That month alone, Dienitz loses 43 U-boats. He orders most of his fleet out of the North Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic, the campaign Germany had to win to choke Britain, is effectively lost. U-boat crews who survived those weeks returned to occupied France in shock. They left harbor believing they were winning. They come home to find that the enemy shipyards have made their sacrifices almost meaningless. If you are finding this story compelling, please subscribe. It helps us go deeper into the histories that changed the world. Now back to what happens when Kaiser's lesson moves from the water to the sky. Outside Detroit, rising out of frozen Michigan fields, a new kind of factory takes shape, Willow Run. Designed by Albert Kahn, it sprawls across 3.5 million square feet. At that moment, the largest factory under one roof anywhere on Earth. Its mission is identical to Kaiser's shipyards in ambition and in audacity, but the product must fly. Not Liberty ships this time, 24 Liberators, 4-engine heavy bombers, each one containing more than 1 million individual parts. Over 300 rivets in 550 different sizes. Hydraulic systems, electrical wiring, fuel lines, and control surfaces that must function perfectly at 25 feet in temperatures that freeze exposed metal in seconds. Automobiles have wiggle room, an imprecise fit might rattle, but the car still runs. Bombers do not forgive close enough. Critics call the idea of building bombers on a moving assembly line insane. Dutch Kindleberger, president of North American Aviation, publicly scoffs that you cannot expect a blacksmith to make a watch overnight. The skepticism is real, the problems are real. The government keeps changing the 24's design as combat experience reveals new vulnerabilities. Every modification disrupts the line, dies worth thousands of dollars become scrap overnight. Workers who just mastered one task must be retrained for another. Senator Harry Truman visits Willow Run, sees the delays, and publicly questions whether Ford can actually deliver. Newspapers twist the plant's name into Will It Run. Ford's response is not elegant, it is relentless. 200 engineers work around the clock converting hand-drawn sketches into precise manufacturing blueprints. They produce 5 miles of technical drawings per day. When Consolidated Aircraft sends new design changes that make yesterday's work obsolete, Ford's engineers start again. No speeches, just more drawings. Ford decentralizes. Instead of building entire aircraft at Willow Run, they create a network. Buick in Flint builds engines. Hamilton Standard in Connecticut ships propellers. Goodyear in Ohio produces landing gear. Subassemblies roll in by rail and move through the line as if through a mechanized artery. The logistics alone would collapse a weaker system. For a company that has spent decades perfecting supply chains, it is just another scale up. By 1944, the chaos crystallizes into rhythm. Willow Run is producing one finished 24 every 63 minutes. In April 1944, the plant turns out 453 bombers in a single month. Between April 24th and 26th, 100 completed liberators lift off from the adjacent airfield in 72 hours. The Army Air Forces eventually tell Ford to slow down. They literally have nowhere to park all the aircraft. Training bases overflow with liberators waiting for crews. The pace of production has outrun the pace of deployment. And Willow Run is only one plant. In 1944 alone, the United States builds more than 96 military aircraft. That single year's output surpasses Japan's total aircraft production for the entire war. Between 1940 and 1945, American factories produced nearly 300 aircraft. 300,000 planes parked wingtip to wingtip would stretch more than 30 miles, enough to circle the Earth at the equator. At peak, American industry is building more aircraft in 1 month than Germany possesses at the start of the war. Gring, who once laughed at Roosevelt's production targets, lives to watch his Air Force shattered by the precise industrial surge he dismissed as fantasy. After the war in captivity, he admits that the tempo of American shipbuilding surprised and upset them deeply. Claims of building ships in 8 to 10 days had sounded like propaganda. They were not, but Hitler's armies do not just face American machines. They face American soldiers, and here, for one brief and brutal moment, it appears his prejudices might have found their proof. February 1943, Tunisia, Kasserine Pass, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Afrika course tears through inexperienced American positions. Units break and run, tanks burn, equipment is abandoned in roadside heaps, command and control ruptures. Over 6,000 American casualties in days. From the German side, it looks like confirmation of everything they believed. American soldiers are green in every way that matters. Many have never fired a weapon in anger, officers paralyzed under fire. Units that should support each other fighting in isolation. The disaster at Kasserine flows back to Berlin in intelligence reports that seem to prove what Hitler has always said. The Americans are soft, their equipment is plentiful, but their soldiers are weak. German martial spirit beats American machines. But Rommel is too good a general to freeze his thinking in February. He watches what happens next, and what he sees begins to worry him. The Americans recover with startling speed. Within weeks they reorganize. Incompetent commanders are relieved without ceremony. Hard lessons are applied immediately on the ground. General George Patton takes over the shaken II Corps and transforms it through sheer force of will and specific tactical correction. Artillery forward observers are pushed into better positions. Tank tactics are revised. Infantry learns to coordinate with armor. The disaster at Kasserine is not buried, it is dissected. Back in the United States, the findings go straight into training camps. The mistakes of February become the curriculum of March. Rommel later writes that the tactical conduct of the American defense had become first class, that they had recovered very quickly after the first shock, that they had succeeded in damming up the advance. And like many of his peers, Rommel does not assume the Americans will remain what they were on first contact. He watches them get better in real time and understands what that means. By May 1943, 3 months after Kasserine, the North African campaign is over. Approximately 275 German and Italian soldiers march into Allied prisoner of war cages, more than surrendered at Stalingrad. The same Americans who panicked in February are among the victors. The speed of the recovery shocks German officers. In their experience, routed units need months to rebuild. The Americans do it in weeks. Then comes June 6, 1944. German commanders in France know an invasion is coming. They do not expect its scale. On that single day, over 156 Allied troops land on the beaches of Normandy, supported by nearly 7 naval vessels and approximately 11 aircraft. The landing craft, the transport aircraft, the tanks, the trucks, the warships bombarding coastal defenses, most of it built in American factories by the people Hitler dismissed as racially incapable of war. On the sand and in the hedgerows beyond, German defenders fight with their usual ferocity. In some sectors they inflict terrible casualties, but the attackers' numbers and firepower are crushing. When an American infantry company meets a strong point it cannot take with rifles, it calls for artillery. The response is not a token volley. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of shells fall on a single grid square in minutes. When the infantry moves again, tanks go with them. When tanks stall, aircraft are called. Bombs, rockets, cannon fire follow. German soldiers who have fought on the Eastern Front say the American style of war feels different from Soviet tactics. The Soviets throw men, the Americans throw machines. The result is similar, overwhelming force applied until resistance cracks. But the American cost in blood is lower, that is by design. Use. Doctrine explicitly values firepower over manpower. Why risk a rifle squad when you can't spend steel? Why bleed men when you can't spend ammunition? Hitler's misjudgment does not just color speeches. It shapes decisions that cannot be undone. Because he believes the United States will not be an effective enemy, he declares war on America without any obligation under the Tripartite Pact to do so. Japan attacked. Germany was not attacked. His own foreign minister reminds him that a declaration of war adds a powerful opponent for no guaranteed gain. Hitler waves the concern away. He does not believe America can change the outcome. A nation of racial mongrels, divided by class and corrupted by its own diversity, cannot in his mind mount a serious challenge. He's staring at the wrong America. By spring 1945, the 1,000-year Reich is measured in weeks. American and British forces drive in from the west. Soviet armies crash in from the east. German cities burn underground. The clock bombing the Luftwaffe cannot stop. The factories that once armed the Wehrmacht are rubble. Strategic reserves are gone. Fuel is nearly gone. Rail lines are broken. German soldiers fight with the same dogged courage they showed in 1940. But now they fight without ammunition that arrives reliably, without vehicles that have fuel, without replacements that appear when needed. The army that slashed across Europe in 1940 now scavenges. On the Allied side, American units receive hot meals. German units forage. American wounded are evacuated to field hospitals within hours. When American tanks are lost, new ones appear. When ammunition stocks run low, convoys roll forward. The Red Ball Express and around, the clock truck convoy system largely driven by African, American soldiers serving in segregated transportation units, moves approximately 400 tons of supplies in just 3 months. The men Hitler called racially inferior are literally fueling the advance that destroys his empire. On the 30th of April 1945, Hitler dies in his bunker in Berlin. He goes believing his analysis of America was correct. If Germany has lost, he tells those around him in his final days, it is because the German people have failed him. Because his generals betrayed him, because fate was unfair, he never accepts that his fundamental assumptions about the United States were wrong. He rants about miracle weapons that do not exist, about divisions that exist only on paper, about counterattacks that cannot succeed. Reality has left him entirely behind. His delusions about American weakness remain intact until the last moment. The numbers that bury his armies are not ideological, they are simply cold. American industry supplies nearly 2/3 of all Allied military equipment in the war. 297 aircraft, 86 tanks, 193 artillery pieces, 2 million army trucks, built by farmers and housewives and laid off factory workers and Americans fleeing the segregated South. Built by ordinary people doing extraordinary things because circumstances demanded it, and because their country, messy and chaotic and diverse as it was, gave them the tools and the organization and the reason to do it. Henry Kaiser never becomes a household name. After the war, he returns to private ventures. The shipyards that launched vessels in days are dismantled or retooled for peacetime. The workers who made the impossible routine go back to ordinary lives. Willow Run is sold, reconfigured for civilian production, and eventually closed. By the time General Motors shuts the plant in 2010, few people driving past it remember that it once symbolized a nation's capacity to defy arithmetic. The welders go home, the riveters become teachers and housewives and office clerks. The men who crossed oceans rarely talk about it. The women who built the arsenal of democracy return to kitchens and neighborhoods, and mostly do not speak of what they did. What they built outlasts all of them, not in monuments or headlines, but in the simple fact that the war was won, and the world that followed was possible. Hitler looks at Americans in January 1942 and sees only their limitations. He does not see their capacity to rise. He mistakes the America of peacetime for the America of total war. He sees diversity and reads weakness. He sees comfort and reads softness. He sees factories making refrigerators and does not imagine them making bombers every 63 minutes. That is the miscalculation that costs him everything. Nations are not fixed quantities. Societies are not static. The capabilities on display in peace are not the ceiling of what is possible when the moment demands more. A country that looks weak in one moment can become something entirely different in the next if it has the will, the organization, and the people to rise to what is asked of it. America had all three. Hitler never saw any of them coming. In that quiet room in East Prussia on the 7th of January 1942, where no one contradicts the man explaining why the most powerful industrial nation on earth does not matter, that room is where the war is truly lost, not on the beaches of Normandy, not in the skies over Berlin, not in the frozen passes of Tunisia. In a warm room with one man misreading a nation he never understood. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Every video we make goes this deep into the moments and the minds behind the history. We will see you in the next one.